you about a man called Scaramanga, fellows?
The man with the golden gun. The KGB recruited and trained him in Europe, where he became an overworked, underpaid assassin. He went independent in the late 50s. Current price, $1 million a hit.
Nobody knows where he is or what he looks like. So I think it's fair to assume that he has the edge on you.
If I found him first, sir, that might change the situation.
Dramatically. Good day, Bond.
This is not a real one.
Welcome to the Tailoring Talk Show with me, your host, Roberto Revilla. I'm a bespoke tailor, menswear designer, and founder of Roberto Revilla London Suit and Shirt Makers. This is the podcast where you drop in for the threads, but often leave with something quite unexpected. If you haven't already, please support the show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's time for part 9 of the Tailoring Talk James Bondathon, where we follow the James Bond film series in order, ticking off each movie as each month goes by. My guests and I deep dive into each film, covering everything from our overall review to the plot, close, gadgets, cast, behind-the-scenes stories, and our favourite moments. Step once again into the Tailoring Talk time machine as we head to 1974. Hot on the heels of the mega successful Live and Let Die, the Bond producers wasted no time getting The Man with the Golden Gun into production, and we cannot wait to tear into this one. Once again, I'm joined by the man with the golden facts. It's Philip Rahman. Philip, how are you?
I'm good, Bobby. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Are you armed and prepared? There's no Richard to show you up this week, this month.
I'm always prepared, Bobby. You know that.
Brilliant. I should have said there's no Richard to gore you this month.
To do what?
That's his surname, Richard Gore.
Oh, yeah. Right. Okay, yeah. Makes sense.
Anyway, sorry. Next, you just heard his dulcet tones, a dear friend and colleague from the Play, Pause, Turn podcast. It's the man with the golden voice. It's John Evans. John, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Sorry for interrupting you earlier on there. That was very rude of me. I'm very sorry about that.
John, with a voice like yours, you can interrupt as many times as you want.
Okay, I will.
Last but not least, another dear friend and colleague from the Play, Pause, Turn podcast. If you're playing the Play, Pause, Turn podcast shot game, that's 2 you need to down. It's the man with the golden bum, Alex Hansford. Alex, how are you?
Golden bum? I didn't consent to that.
This is a reference to a tweet that your darling wife put out.
Very true.
In which apparently you said you were going to the toilet and she promptly pictured you doing something really weird looking at the back garden fence.
I was just contemplating life. I wasn't doing anything else.
It really looked like you were walking the paths. It looked like
I was having a wee. But anyway, yeah. Moving on.
Exactly. And if our listeners are morbidly interested in that, then go to Amy Hansford's Twitter feed and you'll see Alex in half his glory. Before we get started, I want to get our spoiler alert in early for once. This film has been out for 42 years. 42? 48 years? 48 years. But regardless, for those of you who haven't seen it, we will be spoiling the living daylights out of this one. So if you haven't seen it, hit pause. I was about to say play pause. Hit pause, go see the movie and rejoin us after. The Man with the Golden Gun was released in December 1974, runtime of just over 2 hours and a budget of $7 million, the same as Live and Let Die. but it grossed just over half of its predecessor's take with $97.6 million. Starring Roger Moore as James Bond, Christopher Lee as Francisco Scaramanga, Britt Ekland as Mary Goodnight, Maud Adams as Andrea Anders, Hervé Villechaize, I have no idea if I pronounced that right, as Knick Knack, Richard Liu as High Fat, Sun Taek Oh as Lieutenant Hip, Mark Lawrence as Rodney, Marne Maitland as Lazar, alongside returning cast regulars Desmond Llewellyn, Bernard Lee, and Lois Maxwell. So it was, I want to say it's my first time watching this film ever. I'd seen snippets of it as a child, so I do remember Christopher Lee as Scaramanga and his golden gun. And I do remember one of the most famous stunts in film history, probably. But I didn't really remember much else than that. So definitely my first time yesterday. Phil, how about you?
Again, I only remember snippets from it, particularly the kung fu fighting scenes were something I remembered. I didn't actually realize it was from this film, but I do remember that. And then I also weirdly remember seeing Roger Moore take off his top and show a third nipple. And I wasn't entirely sure why when I saw bits of it years ago, but it all makes sense when I saw it yesterday.
Right. John?
I think I've seen this about 3 or 4 times, but my memory was hazy. This is the first Bond film to be made after I was born. So that's why I feel like again, Bond's Moore's my Bond. But yeah, I didn't remember. I remember the gun that you could build out of cigarette lighters and things. And I remember the laser, which is very Bond. And I remember Knick Knack. Although I was getting Knick Knack confused with the dude that has the hat with the blade in it, the Peaky Blinder that he throws around.
Oh, Odd Job.
Is that Fantasy Island?
Yeah,
Odd Job. Yeah.
Yeah. From You Only Live. No, Dr. No. Goldfinger.
Goldfinger. Yeah, let's get those two mixed up.
Yeah. Sorry, John. I thought we were born in the same year, but we're not. This film was made before I was born. Alex.
Yeah, I have a vague memory of it, but I must have blacked it out of my mind.
You must have blacked out while you were watching it.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, as I watched it, it was just, I don't know, it just doesn't date very well. I think that's probably as far as we'll go. We've got a lot more to go into about that. But yeah, the more I watched it, the more I was like, is this really a Bond? And yeah, it definitely is. But yeah, it's a weird one.
Yeah, the tone is kind of weird. It almost, my feeling after seeing it was that it was almost like they tried to inject a bit of Sean Connery into the character and take it away from Roger Moore's sort of natural, personality instincts of how he wanted to play the character or would have played the character. So it's almost like the kind of 007 identity was a little bit mixed up in this film for me. But like you said, we'll come on to that. So brief synopsis. A loose adaptation of Ian Fleming's posthumously published 1965 novel of the same name. The man with the golden gun has Bond sent after the Solex agitator. Sounds like something that John would pre-order and get really excited over. A breakthrough technological solution to contemporary energy shortages while facing the assassin Francisco Scaramanga, the man with the golden gun. The action culminates in a duel between them that settles the fate of the Solex. Sounds like the synopsis for a epic sci-fi film like Dune or something. So I guess we start with the plot, since I dared to go there. What did we think of the story overall? It was very kind of pared down, I felt, compared to previous outings. John?
It felt like a duel. It felt like sort of a parry and hit from between Bond and Scaramanga, with everything else kind of revolving around them. And you're right, it was pared down. It was quite a simple idea, wasn't it? it didn't seem to. I mean, the locations were fabulous whilst we're there, but it seemed a bit less varied in its locations and much more centered, probably around the rather high budget they spent on Scaramanga's lair. But yeah, you're right. It feels like a duel, doesn't it? This film almost.
Yeah, definitely. Almost a two-hander. I mean, the villain in this one is given quite a lot to do. I mean, Christopher Lee was given quite a lot in terms of, script and dialogue and so on. I thought he did a really good job, actually. Originally, I should have said before, so originally, because the book was the last one, I think it was the first, it was published posthumously, so it was published after his death. And the original story was that Bond was captured and brainwashed by the KGB, and he tries to assassinate M. And then as penance, he's basically sent on a mission to eliminate, the world's most elite assassin, the man with the golden gun, Scaramanga. But, as usual, the producers, the story's driven by location, as we found out with Diamonds Are Forever to our great cost. And originally they wanted to film in, I think it was Iran, but there was some sort of war going on there, and it was too hot for Cubby Broccoli, who, as we all know, was sort of powerfully built. So it went through some rewrites, and then eventually we ended up with what we saw this weekend. Phil, how was the story for you?
I thought it was easier to follow than previous Bond films. I think what they did was they cashed in on the recent success of Enter the Dragon and also The Wicker Man. And I love the fact that it was shot in Macau. And they also combined it with a bit of the old Kung Fu and ninjas, which I absolutely loved in this film, personally. I think in some respects, although Alex said hasn't sort of aged very well, the actual subject matter is very apparent with what we're going through at the moment in terms of cost of living crisis and the possibility of energy that might actually need to be rationed. And this is one possible solution that this film came up with for the energy crisis of the time, which was at the time very much about the 3-day week and the need to reduce the electricity demand, and because we were having power cuts in the UK at the time.
Do you feel like the energy crisis thing was kind of slightly shoehorned in just to try and make everything look a little bit more, I don't know, kind of just to pad things out a little bit and make it seem a bit more intelligent?
I think they were probably, at the time, they probably would have shot in Pinewood, and there probably would have been outages that they would have had to have dealt with at the time, and they probably thought this might be a good way of introducing that to the story. It would have been fresh in the minds of people that were watching it in 74. So it might have been something that they shoehorned in. I can't imagine that was something that Ian Fleming wrote about when he wrote it in 65.
Yeah, I don't think he did. I've actually got the book in front of me. Richard very kindly had a load of them lying in his garage that were going to go on a bonfire or something, and so he posted them and he dropped them to me last time he was in London. So I'm looking forward to getting into those. Alex?
Yeah, well, it does feel tacked on, doesn't it? There's no real consequence in the actions that you see apart from between him and Scaramanga. And yes, there's we'll talk about it a bit more later on, but there's the laser moment. But really, apart from that, there's no sort of visual cues to kind of remind you of the consequences of this. And it was funny. I thought almost that we'd watch something being put together, as a commentary on where we are right now. But Alex, actually, it wasn't.
If you look at the history of the 70s, though, especially in the UK, there were lots of planned blackouts.
Oh no, absolutely. But what it missed is
to that.
It must have missed the context, because there's no visual context of that in the film itself. And I think that's what threw me, is that maybe that's just, now we're a bit more, we expect to be spoon-fed a bit on that. But what I was kind of hoping was that they would show, I don't know, Macau or Hong Kong going dark, and then it'll be like, well, this is the consequence if you don't get this But instead, we just had some shouty moments from him, which was fine.
I think at the time, though, that films, the way they made them then, they wanted people to escape from that sort of thing. They didn't necessarily want to put it in people's faces. It probably would have made people less interested in watching the film, knowing that was going on. That's what they did a lot back then. They made films to escape.
The problem is, of course, that the power cuts in the UK were mainly caused by the miners' strike. I don't think Bond wants to bring too many politics into the film.
Yes, that's true.
You see, so it's tricky for them to make it relevant without making it too political. I'm not sure how. I mean, Bond is fairly apolitical, isn't he? I mean, he works for the government, but I mean, there's no real commentary of the government in these films. They're just
that's true.
An agency, aren't they? Really?
Yeah, I think they do talk about the efficiency of it being so high that it would solve this energy crisis. So I think it's just it's kind of abstract, but it feels very abstract, which is maybe the problem.
Yeah. I wonder if the script could have done without it, or do you think it then would have felt a little bit too Diet Coke without the kind of Solex agitator thing going on? Would have been a shorter film, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, it would have been a shorter film, but it would have been simpler. I guess the thing is, it didn't really matter. It wasn't like it was. I don't think it really got in the way. I just don't think it added much.
Yeah. I know what you mean about consequences, though. Phil, I totally take your point. I think that's a really, really good point about the fact that people, sort of living through that crisis in the 70s probably, were going to the cinema if they could, and if there was power at the cinema, to get some form of escapism and not be reminded of, the awful things that were going on. But then at the same time, I totally get Alex's point, because if you look at previous Bond films, so the Connery ones, I mean, the famous one we all remember, obviously, is Goldfinger, where, there was big consequences. If Bond, that's what you felt about the Connery Bonds, is that if he didn't achieve his mission, there would be some kind of local, global consequence of some sort. So there was peril, there was something at stake, whereas this kind of Solex agitator thing, yes, it solves an energy crisis or so on, but I know an audience at the time would have known how much gravity there was in that situation. It wasn't very forward thinking, I think, in the way that, do you know what I mean?
I think the issue is that, solar energy by today's standards is quite a simple thing to achieve. You can put a solar panel on your roof and you can get some energy from it. And there are solar panels.
I'm just making a note to at this episode at Liz Truss when it goes out. Carry on.
Yeah. There are solar farms, so people understand, how to harness solar energy. It's very easy. I think maybe in 73, 74, it probably was a very complicated thing, and probably made to sound more complicated than it was. This one device, this chip, is the thing that it makes the difference between having an abundance of energy or having no energy, from a solar point of view. So that made it a little bit more far-fetched watching it by today's standards.
Yeah. So let's move on to the cast. Obviously, Roger Moore returns for his second outing as Bond. Obviously, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about him because he's the star of the show, and then we'll move on to our sort of favourites. But, I thought he did a good job. I do wonder if there was some interference going on behind the scenes, because he seemed a very irritable Bond, very pissed off a lot of the time, very short-tempered. There's the slap, that's right, John, on Maud Adams' character, which is very Sean Connery, but it's not very Roger Moore. So it seems like there was a bit of a struggle with his identity. It's almost like they wanted to sort of, bring Sean's essence back. That sounded a bit wrong. But at the same time, there were some comedic moments in here that, I mean, we really laughed our nuts off. The scene where the belly dancer's got the bullet that killed 002 in her belly button, and he goes kissing her in the abdomen, and the baddies burst in and he accidentally swallows it. Um,
I was really hoping
numerous.
for a scene for a scene like later on with the chamber pot where you hear the ding, there it is. Sort of later on, but it was just never shown, was it? There's not even like leaving the toilet in his hotel with a flushing sound behind him.
Turbo lax.
Stirring it into his vodka martini or whatever, So.
Oh god! Also, but if you look at the shape of that bullet, right?
That's
because it was all sort of splayed at the end. That's going to be painful when it comes out at the other end, surely.
Yeah.
So exactly. I mean, that really is going to tear you a new one on the way out. So I felt there was a little bit of push and pull with his character there. Alex, how was Roger for you in his second outing?
He was quite comical. I think a lot of it was hard to believe. It was funny, but also just you had to sort of leave your skepticism at the door, because it wasn't. A lot of it was, oh come on, that's just not gonna. But it was funny. I had a smile on my face also while I was watching it, so it was doing its job. But I just think some bits of it were quite cringe.
Yeah. It's another one of that. It's like Live and Let Die. It's not the greatest Bond film, but I was pretty much engaged for the 2 hours. I didn't want to get up. I wasn't looking at my phone, which is the big test. We've talked about this before. So it's really funny that as not great a film as it is, that it was very engaging and it was very entertaining. John?
I enjoyed it because it was hilarious, and I think we now accept that more is the funny one with the quips, and so we can go along with it. I enjoyed the variety of it. It kept me interested. To be honest, I didn't remember it last time, but I never realised how funny Nick Nack was as a character as well. Like there's some really random scenes in it. There's a scene in High Fat's garden where They but the next time that Bond comes around, pretend to be Scaramanga, and they all know. They drop him, don't they? And there's this scene with Nick Nack standing on his chest, about to take him out with a trident, and Scaramanga goes, "Oh, Nick Nack, stop!" Just really bizarre, surreal scenes.
It really reminded me of Dr. Evil and Mini-Me.
Yeah.
That's what I said to Carolina. I said, the one Austin Powers, inspiration from You Only Live Twice. And what do you call it? Mini-Me for Austin Powers 2 had to be inspired by Nick Nack in that. You're absolutely right. I mean, he was a creepy little one, wasn't he? Carolina found him really, really creepy. She said I showed her the trailer. I told you guys on the Discord. I showed her the trailer on Sasa. So this is what we're watching on Sunday. And when Nick Nack first appears on screen in the trailer, Carolina just went, "What the is that creepy little?" Anyway, Phil.
I felt that although he was more of a comical character, I did feel that there was less chemistry between him and some of the other characters. So where Sean Connery had great chemistry with Moneypenny, I felt there was like zero chemistry between those two. And it's weird because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Roger Moore, I think, was a little bit older than Sean Connery, or they're pretty close. So there should have been a bit more sort of. I felt there should have been a bit more sort of chemistry with Moneypenny and some of the other characters, and there just wasn't. I did like. I personally, I don't see Hervé Villechaize as a kind of a creepy character. It just reminds me of the guy from Fantasy Island for me. So it's just, that's how I see him. It's just, that's who he is. But I would say that as a Bond, I feel like he's still trying to find out who he is. He's not adverse, contrary to popular belief here. He's not adverse to the old spanking. If you ever watch The Saint, he did quite a bit of that in that show. So I think he's. Did you mean
slapping rather than? Did you mean slapping rather than spanking?
spanking. There was a scene in The Saint, a very famous scene now, where he's trying to get information out of this girl who's wearing a bikini, and he bends her over his knee and starts spanking her on her bottom constantly until she gives him the information.
Right.
It's quite. If you look it up you'll find it on YouTube.
I'm doing it now.
John's on the case.
Yeah.
I think Sean Connery and Roger Moore are roughly the same sort of age, because Sean Connery's in his early 40s when he does Diamonds, and I think Roger Moore actually might be a couple of years older than Sean Connery, even though arguably Sean Connery looks a little bit older at the same stages of age. But anyway. And then, obviously the other main character for the film was Christopher Lee. Now, Christopher Lee and Roger Moore knew each other from previous. So there were some cast links going on here because when they finished serving in the army, they were at the same, whatever it was, theatre agency or whatever together. And they also did an episode of Ivanhoe together. You remember I talked about this last time that Roger Moore did Ivanhoe for a couple of seasons. And so there was that kind of natural sort of rapport between them because they did know each other. I thought Christopher Lee was great. I thought possibly one of the best villains to date. He was so charismatic, and especially when he kills High Fat, and then the henchman runs in and says, "What happened?" And he said, "Mr. High Fat has resigned. I'm now taking over as chairman of the board." And then he exits and he points at the mausoleum and he's like, he loved that mausoleum or something. Stick him in it. Very callous, very cold. I thought he was really, really good. Alex, what were your? How did you feel about Count Dooku?
He was quite convincing. He was appropriately aloof, but I felt like he was committed to getting rid of Bond. And I think that's all he needed to do, really. So, I liked it. And obviously, by the end of the film, it makes sense, the weird set that they had created and all this kind of stuff. But at the start, when that starts off, you're just like, what on earth is going on? And then you realise he's being trained. And then it kind of made more sense.
Yeah.
But we always knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, Becca said to me, my wife said to me, hold on, what's going on? Because doesn't Nick Nack work for him? Why is he putting him through?
Trying to kill him, yeah.
I said, Becca, this is basically the Bond version of Cato and Clouseau. She went, I see. So I used the Clouseau Cato analogy in this scene.
Nice.
Do carry on.
Oh, that's good.
It's really good one.
He was a good one.
Another tenuous link there, John, because Burt Kwok obviously appeared in the Bond films a few times during the Connery era.
There you go. Wasn't Peter Sellers in I think the first Casino Royale as well?
He was in the first Casino Royale with David Hill. Yeah, that's right. We haven't done that one. I'm wondering if we should still do that one for completeness.
I think we should.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we will. So yeah, and then Christopher Lee knew Britt Ekland because they were in the Wicker Man together. So I think there were some nice little links between the cast. Funny enough, you mentioned Lois Maxwell, Moneypenny earlier, Phil. I didn't realise that this was the first film for about 5 films where we were back at M's. We saw Moneypenny in M's office because she wasn't in the last one. And then the last couple, she was at the airport or whatever, the port with Sean Connery and so on. Yeah. So she'd been pushed sort of into the background a lot more than in the previous films, which is a shame because Lois Maxwell's very charming. And, we sort of miss her. But I was really glad to see Desmond Llewellyn back. I think his presence was really missed in the last film. And he really, really does make these series. We'll come on to Gadgets, because there weren't actually really many of those. But it was really good to see him back. And then Bernard Lee, I thought, was great. He's obviously getting older. He looked visibly older in this film. And he looked a lot grumpier, but then I don't blame him because obviously you got Bond's usual. Oh, by the way, he has the greatest line in the film when he talks about, what is it, tailors, butchers, and whatever's wives or something like that, in response to who would want Bonds, who would want to kill me. So yeah, sorry. Where should we go, John? Other standouts in the cast.
I mean,
we're going to come on to the girls have got their own category. We'll come on to them.
Okay, we'll come to girls. I thought I'm just trying to find his name now. The Chinese agent, was he Chinese?
Lieutenant Hip.
Lieutenant Hip. I thought he was really
and
good,
his nieces.
Yeah, they were brilliant. I mean, I got a little sort of twinge of Kill Bill when that scene kicked in, and they were like, he's like, girls, let me take care of this, and then they go, actually, and then sort of push him back and start flying around doing some chop socky, and I thought that was really cool. I enjoyed him. I enjoyed the return of Clifton James when he's being pushed into the water. Bobby's rolling his eyeballs here. I just thought he was, they're going for continuation. He must have been around on set or something. They come and join us, or come with us to Macau and film.
Cubby called him up because he wanted him back in the film for some reason, and he said Sergeant Pepper, or whatever his name, Colonel Pepper or whatever, is on vacation. I want you to come to set, do a few days of filming, and he's on vacation, so I want you to bring your ideas about what he should be getting up to. So that's where that little reunion came in, and Harry Saltzman had nothing to do with it by this stage. Harry Saltzman and Cubby Broccoli had a real falling out. I think the cracks had started to appear on the set of Diamonds, which no doubt, caused by all the frisson between Saltzman and Sean Connery and so on that we spoke about before. But by this time, their relationship was literally, that was it. This was divorce time, and Saltzman sold his shares in Danjak. And this was the last time that he'd be that heavily involved on a Bond film. He was not happy with a lot of the choices that were made in this film either. Originally, apparently they pared it down. So the Bottoms Up Club was going to be a brothel or something. And, the girl that sticks her bottom at the camera when we cut from Maud Adams and Roger Moore to the Bottoms Up Club, and it literally is a bottom up, was less modest than it was in the final cut. There was a lot that Saltzman was not happy with, but he didn't really have that much of a say in it because, so anyway, there we are.
It's not a massive cast, though, is it? It's not a massive cast, this film.
No, actually. Very small cast. That's why I pretty much read them all out at the beginning. It is a very small cast. So it almost feels like a very grand play, because you've really got two things going on in this film, and that's it. You've got the overriding thing, which is Bond going after Scaramanga because he believes that that bullet was meant for him, and he's taken it very, very personally. So he's gone on a sort of vendetta, and then you've got this kind of Solex agitator sort of plot in the background, which is really neither here nor there, to be quite honest. It's a nod to what's going on at the time, but there doesn't really seem to be that many consequences to him not achieving that mission. The overriding thing seems to be that he has to kill Scaramanga. So yeah, there we go. Alex, standouts apart from the girls, standouts in the cast for you. Any favourites?
It's a good question. I think, I think Desmond Llewellyn's cue was good this time. It was actually funny because he was being the geek that was taking on some of the stuff. Oh well, that would be funny, and it's like it's like his comments and that. So I really enjoyed that. Because it's such a small cast, there aren't that many people to talk about. I think that Nick Nack really stole the show for most of it, almost to the problem with Scaramanga, because you ended up didn't want Scaramanga to win at all. So I kind of felt the balance there was a little bit off. But yeah, apart from that, I just couldn't stop cringing when we talked about Clifton James's appearance. Though that was just the funniest, and the whole thing where he goes and says, "It's all right, I'll deal with this boy, and then just walks along with his wallet falling out. I was in stitches, but it was so bad. So it was kind of just I don't know what it was, but it was funny because of how cringe it was.
We also got a bit of Phil. I'll bring you in on this because we're overly sensitive to it, being that we as Blick. He brought a bit of his casual racism in as well at the guys in the boats. You know, if you didn't spend all day in your pajamas, you might get some work done or something like that.
He called them pointy heads, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, it's, you know, they're more poking fun at the Americans, you know, in terms of American tourists and how stupid they are, rather than sort of looking at it from a racial point of view. So I wasn't bothered by that at all. It actually makes him look more stupid than anything else. I mean, for me,
I think
the real
you're right.
standout.
The point is that we're laughing at him, we're not obviously meant to be laughing with him.
Yeah, and they treated audiences back then with a bit more intelligence than they do now. Because now when you got a character like that, they're concerned that other people are going to follow suit and act just like them. And they didn't have that kind of attitude back then. They basically put the characters on to basically shine the light on how some of these people would, you know, how they act. And they were there to be poked fun at. But I mean, for me, the standout character by a mile was Christopher Lee in this film. Because for some reason, whenever I see Christopher Lee, I always think he's much older than he is, because I remember as a kid watching Hammer horror films, seeing him as a really old looking Dracula, and then I see him in this, and I see him in Wicker Man, and he's like, you know, young, you know, fit guy, and clearly not concerned about Bond at all, because his mission was to kill the solar expert, and he knew who Bond was, and he just let him go. He let him live. He thought he could take him anytime. He trained, and he wanted to take him in his own lair, and I liked that about the character. And he could have easily had loads more women if he wanted to. No trouble at all.
Could have let him die, but he let him live, didn't
he? I liked Scaramanga personally. He's my kind of villain.
I did think he was a great villain. Now, brings us neatly on to the girls. So Maud Adams, who is playing Andrea Anders, who is basically Scaramanga's ill-fated mistress, and it turns out that it was actually her that sent the bullet with 007's name on it to bring him out there, because she wants him to kill Scaramanga to escape from him. And you know, you saw a little bit of that torture that she was going through in that relationship when there's that scene where Christopher Lee has his golden gun and he's, you know, sort of pointing it in at her and swiping it across her face and all of that. Phil screwing up his face. It was kind of quite uncomfortable to watch for us as well. Yeah, and then Britt Eklund as I can't remember her first name, but suppose Goodnight.
Good night.
Good night. Merry good night. Merry good night.
That's you're thinking Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
No, it was MG. So
no, it's Merry Goodnight.
It is Mary.
Is it?
It is Merry Goodnight. Yeah. So she's Bond's kind of former secretary or whatever when he was stationed out wherever she's stationed in McCaw. Funny thing though, Carolina did notice when we shot to McCaw, and it was very obvious because it said "Welcome to McCaw" on the thing. She was like, "Oh, Bond, we're back in McCaw again," and she was referring to Skyfall, obviously, because part of Skyfall with the Komodo dragons and the blue tux is in McCaw. She then did say to me, "Where is McCaw?" And I said, "I've got no bloody idea. Asia somewhere." But you know, talking about both Bond girls, actually, I was a little bit disappointed because I thought the series started off quite strong with some quite strong female Bond girls who had good backstories and good reasons for doing what they did. You know, that their characters were then sort of denigrated by the end of those films is by the by. But then starting with, I think, Diamonds Are Forever, we've just seen, what we're going to call the, God, what was her name in Diamonds Are Forever, John?
Sidekick.
Yeah. No, the Bond girl in Diamonds Are Forever.
Oh God. Yeah, it was a G, didn't it?
Tiffany something.
No,
Tiffany Chase.
Tiffany Chase. Yeah. Tiffany Chase syndrome.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Where post Diana Rigg, there's this steady decline in Bond girls. I'm hoping by the time we get to The Spy Who Loved Me, it's going to tick up again. But I really thought that particularly Britt Ekland's character was really done a disservice in this. I think she was good. I think she was great with what she was given to do. Very attractive girl as well.
But she was the first Bond girl to really not be a sort of simpering, fawning. Oh, she was simpering and fawning at the end, but she was giving back to him a bit, wasn't she, in this film? And I thought that was quite a step forward for the actresses, the female characters in this film a little bit. Even though she got shut in a cupboard at one point, and glass thrown at her at another point.
Well, she got shut in a cupboard, John, while they were doing it, and she basically just had to sit in there through the whole
thing.
Asleep,
didn't she? Poor love.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
And that is quite a degrading thing. And I'll tell you how I know that, because I've been in that situation. That's a story.
What? No, what? Back up there, please. I've got. No, come on. Let's hear this.
To tell the story.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to try and keep this as clean as possible, because I don't want to tick that explicit button for this episode. Okay, so I was applying for an apprenticeship thing at Ford Motor Company. It took place, so they had about 100 candidates. You went to this big hotel in Essex, and you had to go over 2 days. You had to undergo a series of assessments and things like that, and then they picked the best 10 candidates out of 100, 150, whatever. And so I was room sharing with someone who you and I used to work with at Comic Croydon, by the way, Phil, when we were teenagers. Just so happened he happened to be going for the same thing.
Okay.
I'll give you his initials, DB. First name David. That's it. And so he and I were rooming. On the first night, obviously everybody's having drinks and stuff. You've got a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, having a really great time. And my roommate, brings a girl back to the room. And I said, I really hope that she's going at some point soon, because I was preparing my bedtime routine, because obviously I needed to be up early to beat all these other candidates in these series of assessments. And basically they proceeded to get down to business while I was lying in the bed. And in these hotels, the twin beds aren't that far apart, so it was literally right there. Like, I could have just reached out a hand and got involved if I'd wanted to. And it felt quite degrading. I had to leave the room and go and sleep on the floor of a couple of the other girls who were sort of staying 2 doors down that I was getting on quite well. I just knocked on their door and said, can I just sleep on the floor of yours, because they're at it in mine. So yeah, there was a bit more of that story that I wanted to show. You've all gone really quiet, and you're stroking your chins.
A therapy session. For you.
Well, I've never shared this story before.
I have to.
So I now share it at episode. This will probably be episode 67 or 68 by this time.
69, sure.
Over 1,000 downloads a month. 69. Yeah. Okay. I'll do that. We'll see if anyone gets the tenuous link there. So yeah, anyway, there we go. Have we had enough of my ex-colleague's golden gun story?
I think that's too much information, Bobby.
Yeah. So, but the point is, Goodnight was degraded, but
yeah.
But she come good in the end.
But for a Bond girl, she had a lot to do.
Not a great turn of phrase there, Phil.
Yeah.
Sorry,
oh God.
Oh dear.
Any children listen to this will be very confused. Don't worry about it. Uncle Phil is just a little bit mad. So yeah, I didn't think they were the greatest Bond girls. I would guess that Maud Adams probably gets a lot more to bite her teeth into in Octopussy, because she does come back to the franchise. But yeah, on the subject of Andrea Anders, when she's assassinated by Scaramanga at the mixed martial arts boxing match or whatever it is, Roger Moore shows zero emotion whatsoever. He's completely cold and callous. All he's focused on is that Solex agitator, which, if that was Sean Connery, you wouldn't bat an eyelid at that. I wouldn't have thought anything of it because that was the character that he developed. And this goes back to my point again, that it's almost like they kind of wanted him to do a Sean Connery.
They did, Bobby.
Brilliant.
Guy Hamilton wanted to toughen Bond up because obviously the character in the Ian Fleming book was much tougher, less of a comedy character. Ironically, when you think about how funny this film is, some of the things they made Bond do, like twisting Andriana's arms, and Moore didn't enjoy doing that, and he wasn't very happy about even just pushing the boy into the water with the boy with the wooden elephant. So, and later on, there's actually a scene later on which Britt Eklund didn't like very much, which was running away from the island when it was exploding. Because there's a scene in that where they both fall over, or she falls over on the floor as they leave the room.
Yeah, that was for real.
Yeah, and so he picked her up, and then the next scene when they're running out the actual onto the beach, an explosion goes off, and Moore's got his arm round Britt Eklund to kind of hold her up. He feels the hairs on her body start to singe from the flames in that scene. So he was a nice guy looking after everyone, but he was uncomfortable with being the edgier, tougher Bond. And I wonder how that panned out in the Spy Who Loved Me. I can't remember really how he was in that, so we'll have to wait and see on the next one.
Well, I'm really, really looking forward to A Spy Who Loved Me because it introduces our favourite villain, John Jaws.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, Jaws. His name's not John Jaws. It'd be quite cool if it was, though. Maybe it is, actually. We never actually find out what Jaws' full name is. And it is lauded as one of the top, 10, 12, 15 Bond films of all time. So, and definitely a highlight of the Roger Moore series as well. So we've got that coming next. Should be great. And there's a fight on a train, as I remember vaguely. And I think, is that the one with the Lotus?
The one in the water.
Is that the underwater Lotus? I think it is. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see. So Bond Girl's not the greatest. Diana Rigg, still number one. So no change there. No threat to that amazing lady's throne. I think the best Bond girls in this film were those twins, though. Lieutenant Hip's nieces. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. Very, very acrobatic as well. They were absolutely fantastic. They were played by Joy Veja and Yuen Q. I don't know any more about them.
Can I just say that Jaws' name in the Bond films, as Jaws obviously was a nickname because of his teeth, but the character's name is Zbigniew Kryskowski. I think it's Polish or Eastern European. So he actually had a real name, but it's so hard to pronounce. I think Jaws is probably better.
Oh, okay.
Zbigniew Kryskowski, I think his name was.
Yeah. Alex has very kindly put that quote from M in For Me, where James Bond says, "I mean, sir, who would pay $1 million to have me killed?" And M says, "Jealous husbands, outraged chefs, humiliated tailors, the list is endless." Absolutely brilliant. Okay, so
I think you should frame that.
I'm going to. Do you know the other one I want to do as well? You know the guy that was like the Master at Arms guy that was making all those tailored weapons?
Yeah, Lazar.
Yeah, that's it.
Lazar, yeah, that's right.
So, he says to Moore, guns like your Walter, mass manufactured guns like your Walter PPK, I leave to others. Here you will only find the finest in craftsmanship or whatever. I'm definitely framing that one and sticking it on the wall in the workroom.
I loved it because he was an expert and knew what he did and what he didn't do. So he was like, nope, don't go and talk to someone else if you want mass market. Come to me if you're paying by the bullet.
Was that character's voice dubbed though? It felt to me like a very familiar voice that had been used in Bond before, and not his voice. Or was he a voice actor that dubbed someone else previously? That's going to bug me. Keep talking.
Yeah, maybe you're going to look that one up, aren't you?
Yeah, that was strange. Yeah,
apparently Lieutenant Hip, that actor was dubbed twice by two different people in this film.
Right.
So go figure. So cast, where should we go next? Should we go close next? Because bloody hell,
yeah,
I thought He was so well dressed in this film. He's definitely the best dressed Bond, I have to say. Like he rocks up in that light coloured double-breasted suit to start with, and then pretty much all of his outfits for the entire film are on point. Even the safari jacket, he just looks absolutely spot on. I couldn't find any fault. He just looks amazing. You can see that we have left the 60s for sure because the bell bottoms are starting to come in. But he just looks incredible. I just another one where I've just written down most of the outfits, not the safari because I don't think it's me. But I will be recreating a modern version of all of those at some point over the next 18 months. Phil, you've got a little grin on your face while you wear your hoodie.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as cold here. But no, I think the only criticism I would have is that some of the collars were really massive. It was like I was watching Harry Hill or something like that. But I mean, apart from that, I don't have much criticism. I personally didn't like the double-breasted suits, the ones that went right up the military cut double-breasted suit that he had. It reminded me of a client when I used to do it, who insisted on that military cut sort of jacket sort of style.
That was that Tony. What was his name? He had you put the name of a Bond film monogrammed in the inside of every single suit. He was at Lambert Smith Hampton.
That's right, he did, and then he moved to another company. But yeah, he insisted on the first one I did basically had Goldfinger. The second one I did went From Russia with Love, and we were doing a few more after.
Yeah,
that.
I did a couple for him.
He was a very quirky guy. But that kind of that put me off. But yeah, the collars were big. But no, apart from that, I thought it looked great. And I also would say that just going back to some of the Bond girls, if I may, I thought that they were more forgettable. You know, I mean, I couldn't care less about the fact that they killed that girl at the Thai boxing fight. I mean, I don't even remember her name. Was it Anders or something?
Andrea.
Yeah.
Andrea Anders.
Really, really, really forgettable. But Britt Ekland, she can come back to every film as far as I'm concerned. I thought she was great. I think she's gorgeous.
Spoiler alert. This is the only Bond film she's in, Phil. So tough. Sorry, had we moved on to something?
Can we talk gadgets?
He's talked about the clothes. He talked about the clothes.
Oh yeah, sorry. Well, no, but let's ask Alex and John what they thought as well. Tailoring, etc. Alex, go.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of it's been said. That's the challenge because they were completely on point.
Yeah, there's not really much you can criticise.
I would have liked to have seen Britt Ekland in more than a bikini. I felt like we didn't see her in hardly any other clothes. I mean, maybe the bikini just had, an indelible memory, and now I can't get that out of my head. But it just felt like that was her all the time. Yeah, that's
Carolina. Sorry, John's got a backdrop of Roger Moore and Britt Ekland in a bikini behind him on his Zoom thing. Carolina did say she absolutely loved a lot of the ladies' outfits in this. She thought the ladies' sort of tailoring and so on was really good. And she thought Britt Ekland's bikinis were absolutely fantastic. And apparently you can't buy bikinis like that these days. So
why?
Go figure.
It helps that she does have an amazing body.
Yeah.
I mean, just watch The Wicker Man, you'll see it for yourself.
I couldn't bring myself to watch that. I think I've seen bits of it, but it's not really my cup of tea. John,
different pod.
So, I find myself watching these Bond films now with a mind of, Bobby would like that. Oh yes, Bobby would approve of that. So I tend to now have this Bobby filter whenever I watch the suits in films, particularly the first suit he wore with that kind of grey pinstripe. That was, you could tell the material was good because it held itself really nicely. It didn't crease. It was a
flannel.
Really expensive. Sorry.
It wasn't flannel, John. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
It just felt it looked almost like a grey tweed.
Don't say really to someone who's got 20 years in the game. All right.
All right. Yeah, I thought even as you said, even his safari top just felt iconic when he was wearing it. If that makes sense. Often copied by other films. I thought he even looked good. Bond actually looked good in a judo, the karate sort of outfit he wore after he gets knocked out, wakes up in that sort of dojo. I thought that was really good. Well,
yeah. And there was the sports jacket, when Scaramanga's showing him that when he invites him to lunch and shows him the laser and everything, that real heavy check. That I was looking at it really, really carefully. When you've got a really heavily checked jacket, it's very, very difficult to get all the checks to line up if you've got it tailored exactly for the person, because you've got curves, you've got shoulder pitches and stuff to take, so you can line them up at a point. Usually you start in the center of the jacket so it all nice runs through the collar and everything, but then what happens after that is very difficult to control. And I thought they did such a good job with that. I was looking at it really carefully and it was on point. He just best dressed Bond to date by 100 miles. He's absolutely just looks amazing.
I've noticed a lot of check jackets on the high street. So are they on the way out now, Bobby? Check designs, or are they still very now? Generally,
no,
if the designs hit the high street, they're done, aren't they? Normally,
no, not really. We don't really pay attention to the high street. If you want mass market, John, that's where you go. I only do bespoke craftsmanship.
Laid that one out for there, Bobby. Hope you appreciate that.
Thanks. So let's move neatly on to gadgets. Now, you got the Solex agitator.
Oh, there's loads.
The golden gun. The error. I should be getting Alex to do this. Actually, this is Alex's favorite game. Alex, right here we go.
Well,
are you ready?
To give me some. You need to give me some time to queue it up because I'm not sure I've got them all listed.
Okay, well we can do it together. We can all just let's do a free for it. So we got the car with the wings, Solex agitator, the golden gun.
Yep. Laser cannon from the solar power.
Is that classed as a gadget though? I class gadgets as
maybe. I mean, things. It's a laser weapon. I think that's pretty good.
What was going on behind Q and Bond? There's a wall, wasn't there, that got blown out? What was that gadget?
Yeah, I didn't know what they were doing there, but it was funny, it was so great. It was like in GoldenEye. You went in GoldenEye when we first get introduced, when Brosnan's Bond first meets Q there, and they're just doing stuff in the background, and it's just so much fun when they're in Q branch, because Bond and Q wasn't giving him anything there. They were just examining the bullet. Now, what I was looking for when they were sort of working out where the bullet was manufactured is how many grains of feces were on that bullet, because it had obviously come out of, his other end. But they didn't talk about the shite count. Anyway, percentage.
That's true. The other one
what else was there?
There was the tracker as well. Technically that was in the bikini. There was supposed to be a tracker in the bikini button.
Yeah.
Does Bond's fake third nipple count as a gadget?
Yep.
And it was
in disguise, really, though, isn't it?
They obviously didn't know where it was on Scaramanga, did they? Because they stuck it in completely the wrong place.
I guess the intent was that he shouldn't have met him.
Yeah.
So anyone could walk up and say, "I'm Scaramanga," and he wouldn't know. But obviously that didn't work so well. So, So I love the walkie-talkies as well. Yeah. I thought that was great. Sorry, John.
Well, I don't know if it counts as a gadget, but I was really impressed with the offshore HQ that was in the tipped ship, where they got in there at great cost for no reason whatsoever, adapted all the sloping rooms so you could walk across them like the sort of tipped floors and things. I thought, for the time spent on that set, it must have cost a fortune for that scene, but it was a fabulous set inside that ship.
It was just one of those things where they spent a lot of time on something that really didn't matter.
No.
Like they could have easily have just put that in like normally, and it would have worked fine. No one would have questioned it. and it would have just been okay. You know, literally could have just had a porthole or something that he just walks through, and then so yeah, it would have been really easy to make that simpler.
But wasn't that that
we'll
wreck of the Queen Elizabeth I is a real thing? It's in that canal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was a really clever thing to make use of it in that way, because who would suspect an MI5, outpost to kind of be in there? And I thought it was just really, really well done. We did find ourselves both turning our heads all those scenes, but that didn't work because then the actors were the wrong way up. But it was very, very good.
When was the Poseidon Adventure filmed? I wonder if they used sets from that.
I think the Poseidon Adventure, I want to say about 1978. Someone looked that up. Or it could have been 1980, 81, because that was Michael Caine. I remember reading the book.
1972.
Oh, really? It was earlier. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
The only other thing I can think of is we did get a glimpse of Bond's watch, didn't we? Was that a Seamaster? Or
it was a Rolex Submariner, and a friend of mine is actually buying a modern version of that with the blue dial. They go for about 20 grand now because you can't get hold of them. The prices of them have just shot through the roof. But yeah, it's a Rolex Submariner. Even Carolina actually mentioned, I like his watch. So yeah. No, Rolex.
The wife's got expensive taste.
There was another gadget. There was another gadget inside the amphibious plane. There was that map that somehow, amazingly, had the actual names of the places in these remote parts of the Scaramanga Island. It was tremendous.
Good spot, Phil. It was so bad.
Yeah, that was a tremendous gadget.
Surprised Alex didn't.
I also, looking up the history, I also looked up the actual plane, what it was. It's an actual Republic Aviation Corporation. It was made in 1947, and it's a Republic RC-3 amphibious aircraft, and it's built by Republic Aviation, and it was built in Long Island, New York. And they actually, it was one that was built in 1946. And they actually, I don't know if did they blow up the actual plane or did they blow up a replica? Because there was a bit of an accident.
I think
they had a bit of an accident on set on that. Do you have any background on that?
It was donated by a fan, wasn't it? The film was donated by a fan who was a big Bond fan, American guy. But I think to use it in the film, I don't think they blew it up because the condition was being lent to the film crew was he got to fly it himself all the way from the United States to Thailand when he delivered it. I don't think it was destroyed because it was obviously probably a fairly valuable vehicle.
Yeah. No, I love that plane, but the overriding memory, unfortunately, is that stupid map with the place names on the actual map. So it was just hilarious.
It was destroyed. The last entry in the aircraft log on April 21st, 1974 reads simply, "Plane destroyed for movie."
Oh, wow.
Here, buckets of seawater are used by the crew. So I've got a photo in my archive book of loads of people going with buckets of water. Here, buckets of seawater are used by the crew, including Cubby, at left, all in white. He actually doesn't look in this photo like he's actually doing anything. He's just standing there watching everyone. Here, buckets of seawater are used by the crew, including Cubby Broccoli, at left, all in white, to extinguish the flames. And then the destruction of the island itself was that was a recreation.
Was it a model?
Back at Pinewood.
Yeah.
The poor plane did get blown up.
The blowing up of the island, I thought they did a damn good job with, considering the time. If you think back to that, oh my God, the volcanic island that was all sort of overlaid and terribly lit. Do you remember when they were on the dinghy? Which one was that? I think it was the one in Hong Kong or something. I can't remember what it was now. But the effects here were much better. I thought for the 1974 were pretty good for that time.
Yeah, well, Britt Eklund said so it was a bit like, you remember in Live and Let Die, Jane Seymour had that problem. You know, her fingers, her hands had to be in exactly the right place because of where all the charges were laid.
Yeah.
In the poppy field or whatever when that got blown up. And it was the same thing here. So Britt Eklund said, most of us do have doubles, but running through where all the bubbling pots were, that was me. They set the explosions to go off. Everything was timed immaculately to the very second. And when we shot it, Roger grabbed my hand and we started running. The explosions went off. I'm wearing a bikini. They're very, very close. I completely freaked out and threw myself on the floor. You see Roger dragging me up. But again, you know, they kind of gone back to doing as many practical effects as they could and no green screens and stuff, because as we know in Diamonds Are Forever, it really did not work. It looked absolutely shockingly awful. So yeah. And then so Gadgets naturally leads on to Cars. We move away from Ford for the first time in a couple of movies, thank God, because it was getting so obvious with the product placement. But now they are using vehicles from the American Motor Company, I think I'm right. And two vehicles in particular. I have no idea the models of either of them.
The Matador and the Hornet.
There we go. And it's the Hornet that performs one of my favorite stunts, ruined by one of my least favorite sound effects in all of movie time, which is the jump off of the broken bridge, which was done in one take. It was, I think basically they'd seen it at performed at some sort of car show or whatever. And basically to perform that stunt, what they had to do, so they had all the mathematical calculations done, but basically it was a long run up. The driver had to actually sit in the middle of the car centrally, and he had to be traveling at exactly 48 miles an hour in order for the likelihood of that stunt going off without a hitch. And he got it exactly right first time. And in fact, the stunt driver who did the stunt had never actually driven that particular car before. But apparently he wasn't.
Junior was the driver.
Yeah. And apparently he wasn't that worried about it, because it was just like, you know, I get the run up, I get to 48 miles an hour, it'll be fine. I'll be back in 1955, no problem.
It's called the astrospinal jump, that trick.
Only Alex. Nice. Only Alex.
Yeah, but you were 48 miles, it's 88
not
miles,
50.
You know.
Yeah, 88. Yeah, I know. But you know.
But then it is, you know, you'd have trouble getting up to that speed in that car.
Tenuous links, Alex. Long-winded, tenuous links. Okay.
To be fair, when Becca and I watched that and we saw his run up, we thought that is not a long enough distance to make that jump.
Carolina said exactly the same thing.
Yeah, we said the same thing.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. But then there is a cart, isn't there? So you see it moving. It's obviously been moving for a while.
The scene was filmed in slow motion because it was such a quick scene to do. They had to film it in slow motion, and it was the first ever stunt to be calculated by computer modelling. They did actually computer models of the stunt before doing it for real. So the bridge had to be built in a certain way for that to work.
Very good.
And they took into account the weight and speed. So I think you're right. I think there was some regret about the actual sound of the stunt, the whistle scene.
Yeah, it was John Barry's fault.
Yeah, I think
John Barry said I was wrong, Cubby was right. He felt it really detracted. It should have been when the jump happens. The but instead he did that stupid whistle thing, and it really, really spoils it for me. I would love to see a cut of that film where they just remove the sound and put the actual James Bond theme in. And speaking of the James Bond theme, so they took the twangy guitar out of the intro when he does the gun barrel sequence, and they went for a sort of string. They replaced the twangy guitar bit with string instruments. And the idea was it was meant to be sort of less hard-hitting because Roger Moore's a softer Bond and he's a more playful Bond. And it was meant to sort of set the tone up for this Bond for the movie. And then they went and contradicted it with the way that they had him slapping women around and being all angry and, you know, emo, if Mark was here, emo Bond. But then obviously, you know, the thing that we have to talk about, which we've all known we were going to get to, John's got his hands in his face. face in his hand, is Lulu's Man with the Golden Gun, which is not Lulu's fault. She's just singing what she was told to sing, but it's not John Barry's finest hour at all. That song really grates with me, and if I'm shuffling a playlist of all James Bond theme songs, which I do pretty much every single day, that's the one that I always skip.
I would say it is.
They were going on a trajectory of the film's getting better, the song's getting better and better and better and better and better, and then it gets to this one and it's like
So John Barry openly says it was not his finest hour. He said that the soundtrack to this film is his worst work. For some reason, things weren't clicking for him on this one, and he just made a lot of bad decisions.
Yeah, you got 3 weeks to write it as well, which is not a long
3 weeks
time.
is bloody long enough to work on a score, isn't it? Some previous films he'd only had days literally to work on the score because the filming schedule on some of those Connery films was just so tight. So he didn't make any excuses. He actually said 3 weeks. He had 3 weeks to score the film, which was plenty of time. So there you go.
It'll take me longer, mate. That's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah. Obviously it would. So that ranks as, that's probably for me, that's probably the worst James Bond theme in my top. Yeah, you as well, John. Alex?
Yeah, worst.
I'm just trying to see if anyone liked it. Because on Really 007, there's like a few of those guys actually really love it. They think it's great. I think they're mad.
My other half say it's their favourite Bond theme.
The kids love
it's
it.
the most recognisable, but that doesn't count for a lot here.
Yeah, the kids love it apparently. I don't remember loving it. I don't remember loving it when I was a kid.
Do you know what? Every film that we've talked about leading up to this point, I've always looked forward to talking about the film soundtrack. Not in this case.
No.
I was hoping you weren't even going to bring it up because I had forgotten about it until you said, and then we come on to this. And I was like,
bloody hell. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
I'm so sorry.
It was that bad.
Richard has sent in a little fact. He apologises he couldn't be here tonight, but he has sent in a little fact for us. Lulu's only number one was Relight My Fire with Take That. This didn't even go to number one. So there you go. Phil really, look at his Phil really doesn't want to talk about the music anymore.
I want to talk about the kung fu stuff again.
Well, the kung fu stuff. It was a blatant. They wrote that in because it was coming off the success of Enter the Dragon and a couple of other Hong Kong Golden Harvest productions that had done quite well at the time. So like the previous film, blaxploitation, this was Japsploitation.
I mean, it was. I think they did it. I think that the actual scene of the girls fighting the masters of kung fu. The scene completely mirrored exactly the scene where Bruce Lee's sister has to fight off all of those baddies.
Before she gets
dragon when they come to the island.
before she gets
it
killed.
It's exactly the same. Before she has to kill herself. And I thought from that point of view, it was a great homage to Bruce Lee, who recently passed away. So they didn't want to lose his memory or anything. And I think this did a good job. There was another thing I wanted to ask you guys. I don't know if you knew, because I was looking into this. There's a scene where they're at a casino in Macau, and there's baskets being lowered, and then things get put in. What is that? Does anyone know what that is? That a game, or is that gambling?
I think what happens is the people gambling at the top don't have to actually sully their hand to the cards and things. So you just place your money on particular bets, and the actual game is played lower down. And so you have this upper echelon tier of players who are sort of gazing down on the work. I mean, I'm guessing this. I've no knowledge of this at all, but that's what it struck me as. It's kind of like, almost like a sort of a gaming pit they can play in, but have to actually touch the cards or the pieces. It was very strange.
It's like 3D poker, Phil.
Yeah.
So
It's but James Bond always seems to know the rules of every single
Part of
game
his
that
training.
when he goes to any casino, he knows the rules of every single
What
game,
game was
no matter
it?
how absurd or
Was
obscure
it
it is.
poker? What was it?
I don't know. I mean, in the original
No, they were
script,
I think it was some kind of a unusual thing.
one of the original drafts for this, it was meant to open with him playing baccarat, but obviously it eventually ended up with our opening sort of thing with Scaramanga going through his training thing and eventually killing that hoodlum gangster who I thought was a leftover from Goldfinger. Hey, Bond, you want to get up in the front of the car? See, it's much better up here, you see? Oh, boy. So, I wanted to share a little story about Hervé Villechaize with you guys. So, Roger Moore said that Hervé had a voracious appetite for the ladies. He tried it on with Maud Adams. He was 3'9" tall, by the way. So just factor that in. That's barely wider than a child's single bed. He had actually, that sounds really creepy as well. Hervé had a voracious appetite for the ladies, Roger Moore said. He tried it on with Maud Adams one day in the lobby of the Peninsula Hotel. He walked over to her, looked up and said, "Tonight, Maud, I'm going to come into your room, climb under your sheets and make wild, passionate love to you." "Yes," said Maud, "and if I find out you have, I'll be very angry." Oh, bless. Presumably why he ends up strapped to the crow's nest at the end of the film.
Can I just call back to the gambling game in
You may.
in the casino in Macau? So the game is called Sick Bow. Yo, Sick Bow.
Sick Bow.
And it's basically a setting where Scaramanga's bullet maker gives him the bullets to Andrea. But the baskets are called betting baskets. And I think it's so that players can play the game from afar if they want to join in. So it makes the casino more money.
Yeah,
because you see that bit where they pull the bell off, and they've got this sort of dice inside a glass bell, so it's all very self-contained. But it's called Sick Bow.
Yeah.
Anyway,
great. Is there anything else anyone else wants to mention before we head to ratings and overall reviews?
Can we talk about the final scene with which I found myself crying with laughter about on the junk right at the end?
Oh, so, when Goodnight and Bond are getting it on, and then the hatch appears above, and
Nick scuttling around under chairs and tables, and there's Bond like poking sticks under the chairs, and he falls out of skylight. It's like that scene from Top Secret with Val Kilmer, where he goes out one vent and comes out through another vent, and it's being thrown around, and it's just.
Well, Nick Nack's very angry, isn't he? Nick Nack's very angry, isn't he? And there's something that happens when Bond gets to the island, and Nick Nack says to him, "If you kill Master, I'll inherit everything." And that has been Nick Nack's. So in a way, he is the best, worst villain's sidekick in the whole history of the Bond franchise, because from the very beginning, which is why I think when he's in the control room, when Scaramanga is kind of going through what we think is a training exercise, but it's like, ha ha ha, it's locked, you'll have to try another way. I'm like, he's not actually helping his master, is he? He's actually trying to actively get the guy killed. And then for me, anyway, my interpretation of it, when he then tells Bond, "If you kill my master, I'll inherit everything." But then when he jumps down from the ceiling with the knife, it's like, "I'll kill you." But it's "I'll kill you." No, wrong one. That was Live and Let Die. I can't do the accent. He But he's obviously. I will kill you, Roger Moore.
Oh no.
But he's. I'm trying to bring some brevity to the situation, or gravity to the situation. But he's very angry with Bond because Bond has messed up all his plans. He's blown up his boss's island that he was meant to inherit. There's nothing for him now. So yeah. But I thought,
why did Scaramanga store 40 to 50 empty bottles of champagne in a rack? Because every time he threw them at Bond and Bond whacked them, every single bottle shattered without any liquid inside.
There was nothing in them.
There's nothing in them. So what was it, like a display? Was it like trophies? Why? What was all the empty bottles in them? What's the point?
I was just worried for Britt Ekland because I was thinking, hang on a minute, I know it's probably sugar glass, but still, you're wearing nothing but a bikini, and I just didn't want to get hurt, and I was just like, they're just throwing them everywhere.
They had,
but obviously there was no consequence to it because he just threw them, and it'd be like, psh, and it didn't hit anyone.
Have you tried breaking a champagne bottle? They're blinking hard to break.
They're really
rather
hard,
thick,
yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah.
I did try once, and the guy's head just caved right open. Don't understand. The bottle was fine.
Back to Dave again, aren't we?
They had they had people on set, Alex, between takes to hoover up all the glass to make sure that she wouldn't get hurt. So yeah. Exactly. I mean, she's still alive. She's 80 years old. So.
No, I know she was fine, but it was just the thing is, first of all, she was running around a power factory in just a bikini, and I was thinking, wow, she's got to be cold. And then I was thinking, actually, you know what? With all this whole explosions, that doesn't sound very safe. I'm just getting old. That's all it is. I'm more concerned about are they okay? Yeah, exactly. Are you okay? Nice. Put some clothes on. Come on, wrap yourself up.
But Alex, you are the caring one. You are our voice of reason as well. So you're the one when everybody's fighting. See, we haven't had Mark on one of these yet. I really want to get him, but he insists he doesn't get. What doesn't Mark get about? Let's just talk about Mark for a second. I should put him on speaker in the Discord.
We need to drink.
Yeah.
What does Mark not get? Anyone who has not listened to Play Pause Turn podcast yet, here we go. Been waiting for this. Play Pause Turn. This is our entertainment podcast. You'll find John there. You'll find Alex there. Sometimes Alex's lovely wife, Amy. And you'll also find Mark from time to time. We're watching the James Bond films in order. Part of the fun is the fact that some of us have never actually seen any of the early ones. And Mark just goes, I'm an expert on Brosnan. So call me when you get to Brosnan.
Well, we could all say that. But that doesn't mean a lot, does it?
We do need some Mark. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. So anyway, the point is, Alex, you're the unifying force when all is falling apart, but usually it only falls apart when Mark's involved. You are your voice is very calming, actually. I always talk about John's voice, but your voice is equally as rich and beautiful to listen to and very, very calming. You know what you should do? I reckon you could get a really good gig working on, those like meditation tapes? Because that's all the rage now with mental health and all that nonsense. I mean, not nonsense. Sorry, I'll cut that out. Mental health.
I need a sideline.
Very
so
serious.
This is great. Yeah,
but a sideline gig for you.
I need to moonlight a bit, so just to pay my electricity bill. So yeah that would work.
No, John, you should be on those 0891 or whatever they are premium rate phone lines. That's your
only
fans. The water lapped against the beach.
Oh.
I slowly took my clip. Oh.
Do carry on, John. Right, let's move on to ratings. Okay, so I will start with. Let's start with Philip. Philip, what would you rate The Man with the Golden Gun, and where does it sit of the 9 films we've seen so far? What position is this for you? We're almost getting to the top 10 now.
Yeah, I would say I would give this a solid 7 out of 10. It's easy to follow. I liked the kung fu. I liked the locations. I liked Scaramanga. I liked Britt Ekland, and I liked the stunts. There was less emphasis on the gadgets and the cars, unfortunately, but that was okay for me. In terms of, what the content that we got in this film. So the only major failing in this film, as far as I'm concerned, is the very poor song. And but apart from that, I would give it a 7.
Okay,
Happy
great.
with
That's
it.
fair.
I'd watch it again.
You know, the other thing that really irritates me is the fact that he chose to use that, you know, the man with the golden gum as a theme all the way through the golden gum. That's the Wrigley's version, all the way through the film. You know, even the ragtime version in the saloon in his fun house. It just really grated. Anyway, John.
Yeah, I think I give it a 7 too. It lost points for the song, but gained points for Nick Knack. So it is one of the ones I do remember from my childhood as well. So it's stuck in my memory. And for making me laugh so much at the end. And dare I mention this on the podcast? Actually, the final scene might have become part of a role play later on for me as well. Actually, so you know, always I approve of that final scene. So.
So anyone who's up for midget tossing, go around to John and Becca's. Alex.
I'd give it a solid 7 as well. Now, there are lots of cringe moments. It does date very much, but you do end up leaving with a smile. So you do end up just going, okay. I mean, some bits of it were ridiculous, but it was good, and so therefore we're all happy.
So having slept on it, I don't think it's as bad as I did when we watched it yesterday. But if I give it a 7, it means that I put it. I'm just sorry. I keep looking away from you guys.
You have a chart, Bobby.
I have a chart on the. I have a chart on the wall. Yeah. So what I do is they're all sort of written down. You know, 80s game shows, and then I sort of slot them in. You know, consonants, vowels, like countdown. Yeah, I changed the positions around. So if I gave it a 7, I would be saying that this film is better than, in my opinion, Thunderball and On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and it's not. So I'm coalescing as I spin my Bond review roulette ball around the spinny thing. Sorry, Phil, who's probably shuddering. I don't know what these things are. The roulette table of my reviewometer for the Bondathon. It seems to coalesce round about a 6. So I'm going to give it a 6, which means it is below Thunderball and On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but it is above Diamonds Are Forever. And I think that is just about where it should be, which would make it number 8 in the top 9 of the films that we've watched so far. There we go.
Sounds fair.
Good.
Retrospective reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 39% aggregate status, and the average rating is 5.3 out of 10. So I won. There we go. That was it. Man with the Golden Gun. Who's looking forward to Spy Who Loved Me?
Yes. I am.
No preconceived ideas. I'm looking forward to it.
Have you not seen it? You've not seen
it? I remember a little bit more about this one than the others. Great theme song, great cast, brilliant villain. There's a fight on the train, so we have to see if we can get Richard Gore back for the next one, because he loves a fight on the train. I think we might have Kevin, if you're listening to this, can you message me and please remind me if it's A Spy Who Loved Me that you're joining us on. And it also means that we're one step closer to Moonraker, and Artif Ghaffar, the sound doctor, is going to be joining us for that. That's going to be a riot. Anyway, but yeah, Spy Who Loved Me is next. Guys, thank you so much for joining me yet again. I honestly really do love recording these, and I love editing them as well. At the time of recording, I'm about to get our Live and Let Die episode into edit. So that is going to be interesting, because I don't remember half of that recording for some reason. I do not know why.
We know why.
Maybe it was to do with CBD oil. Yeah, there we go. And thank you all so much once again for joining us. We do, as I said, love making these 007 themed episodes. And I love getting your feedback after each one. Tailoring Talk is on Instagram at Tailoring Talk Podcast. You can support the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Roberto Revilla. You can find Alex Hansford on Twitter at
Alex Hansford.
Bloody hell, Alex. Wake up. And you can find John Evans on Twitter at
John PR Evans. PR is my middle name.
There we go. Thank you. Too much information, but anyway. And you can find Philip Rahman not on Twitter, but you can find him on Instagram at
P-Ramen187, I think it is.
It is P-Ramen187. I can tell you that because I tagged you in a story about 5 weeks ago. And you can find me in all the usual places. You can also help us out by reviewing us and giving a rating if your podcast listening vessel allows it. We will be back next month to review The Spy Who Loved Me. Meantime, take care, and I'll see you on the next episode of Tailoring Talk. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done, guys.